Years ago, I had the chance to do part of my studies in Australia. And I was in Brisbane, actually, with my wife, Chris, and our son, Thomas. And during my stay there, I can clearly remember the very first conferences that we had. They were about Australian culture, but also about the risks that us, as foreign students, might encounter over there. And most specifically, there was something about animals, as you can guess. It was about spiders, about snakes. It was also about sharks and dingoes. But as far as I remember, there was nothing about horses. So I was a bit surprised when I came across this article from the BBC presenting horses as the deadliest animal in Australia, saying that actually horses kill more than all venomous animals in Australia. So my first thought was, maybe I was sleeping, maybe I missed something, maybe I missed the part about horses. But digging deeper into that, I felt like, no, I was pretty awake during the whole conference. And then I decided to click on the link, because there is a link on the BBC article, to click on the link that directed me to the study. And then I downloaded the study, I read the study thoroughly, once, twice, 3 times. And guess what? There was nothing about horses. It was not about horses at all. It was about anaphylactic injuries by venomous animals. Even the word horse was not mentioned once in the paper. So obviously, I thought that maybe there is something between the reality of the study, because it's a real study, and the image of the reality that is provided by the BBC. This something is what this talk is about. It is about the gap between the reality and the image of reality. It is about the gap between knowledge and the illusion of knowledge. It is about ignorance. Centuries ago, Plato wrote The Republic. And in Book 7 of The Republic, he presented his famous allegory of the cave. You certainly know the allegory of the cave. You have prisoners, they are chained, their neck, their legs, they're sat, they're back on the wall, they cannot stand up, they cannot turn their head around. They have no other choice than look at the rear wall of the cave. And on this wall, there are shadows that are cast by people that are passing by behind them. They're carrying objects, and they're looking at the shadows, and they feel like they get information about the reality, about the world. They feel like they have knowledge about the world. They feel like they know what the world is. In the allegory, the prisoners were born in the cave. They grew up in the cave, so they have no reason to doubt what they're experiencing. They don't even know that there is something outside of the cave. Their reality is here inside. It was actually 25 centuries ago. And we have to acknowledge that we are still in the cave, despite Plato and his warning about the difference between knowledge and opinions. We are still in the cave, and I would even say that we are deeper in the cave. We are deep in the extension of Plato's cave. We are in the digital cave. So here I have, and I'm sorry for that, 2 bad news for you. The first one is, in Plato's cave, there was only one wall with shadows. Today, we are surrounded by shadows and walls. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of walls around us, projecting shadows every time. We are overwhelmed with shadows. Most of them are called screens. We are surrounded by screens and by those shadows. And it's something it is really difficult to address. It's something that's really difficult to deal with. It's a burden to us. The second bad news is that in Plato's cave, actually, the people that were passing by, they had no intention. They were just wandering, carrying artifacts. In today's world, the shadows that you see in your screens, the images of the reality that you see in your screens, they have people behind them that have intentions, they have goals, they have an agenda that might be with good intention or bad intention, but they have an agenda. They want you to stay stuck in front of those shadows. They want you to think that you're getting information, that you're building knowledge on that. And we usually feel like we're building knowledge on that. But let me tell you something. When you're looking at a screen, when you're reading a text, when you're watching a documentary, right now, listening to me, you're not collecting information at all. You're not building knowledge. What you're collecting is data. What I'm providing you is data, raw data. And I will just give you a tip that might sound a bit counterintuitive at first, but that is really important. Think of your brain as an AI system, an artificial intelligence system. And think that actually you're collecting data, and it's up to you to clean the data, to label the data, to store the data in your inner database, which is your brain, basically. Once you've done that, you will live your life, and at some point you will have to face a situation. You will have to address a specific situation. And there you will collect, you will use, you will mobilize, you will select some of the data that you have in your brain. You will make inferences from those data, and then and only then you will build information, which is data that is useful to you. And then and only then you will start accessing a certain level of knowledge. But until you've made those inferences from your data, what you have is merely data, merely opinions. I also have, which is good, two pieces of good news. The first one is, from now on, if you want, and if you agree with the fact that we're in a cave, you have this option to leave it. You know, you can consider that you're in a cave, that there is something out there that you need to explore, that is a way out that is worth being taken, that maybe there is something to discover outside. That's the first good news. The second good news is, conversely to the prisoners in the allegory, we are not chained. We can stand up. We can turn our heads around. We can look outside if we want to. But something that is really important here is, if you decide that you want to stand up and look around, the first thing that you have to look at is not the exit of the cave. The first thing that you have to look at is yourself. You really have to look inside yourself, because knowledge starts with self-examination. The journey to knowledge starts with self-examination. That it's definitely not easy, that is for sure, but it's really key, it's really important. It's the very first step that we have to take. You have to know yourself. Gnotitheoton, know thyself. It's an aphorism that was on the pediment of the Temple of Apollo in Delphi. Knowing yourself means facing your strengths and weaknesses. It means having an honest look at your knowledge and your ignorance. And I would even say it is much more important to look honestly at your ignorance, being aware of your ignorance. Ignorance is key, and I would even say that knowledge is just a degree of ignorance. You want to increase this degree, obviously, but you have to start with ignorance. Only once you've admitted your ignorance, the extent of your ignorance, only once you faced it honestly, can you start building information and acquiring knowledge. It's not an easy task, once again, because most of us, we tend to think that we know and we are really comfortable in this knowledge. I've learned that not from books, not from The Republic by Plato. I've learned that from experience. Years ago, I was a student at Sciences Po, and I was also an officer in the French Air Force, and I had to report to my senior officer quite regularly. And I can remember that we had this kind of really weird relation that actually I feel is set. It was like he was always reminding me of the hierarchy, almost like my studies were kind of a threat to his rank, to his position, to his legitimacy. So he was always trying to prove me that, despite the fact that I was in Sciences Po, he was the boss, which was obvious and okay with me. And I remember a discussion that we've had, during which he was trying to explain me that he could have done greater things. He could have done higher studies. He could have gone through higher education, but he made the choice to follow the regular, traditional way toward senior officership. But what I was hearing was definitely not the assertion of a choice. It was the expression of a regret. And honestly, I can remember that clearly. Everything in his tone, in his body language, in his eyes was about regret. And that very day, I decided that I did not want to be in that situation, being old, looking back at my career, and having regret because I haven't made my own choice. And then I decided that I had to make my own choice. But to do that, I had to question myself. Not to wait others to set the way for me and to lay the career that I would follow, but just for me to ask myself, what do I want? Is it really what I want to do? Is it exactly my future? What kind of person am I? So I started self-doubting. And that was key, that was really a turning point to me here. But doubt is a two-sword experience. And doubt without direction is a hurdle. It can be a paralysis. It's about not making decisions at all because you're doubting too much. My take is that doubt must not be a hurdle. It must be an empowering tool. It must be something that will give you energy, that will help you to improve yourself, to question yourself, and to do better. So doubt must not be removed from the equation. We must not get rid of doubt. We need to make doubt our friend. And I would like here to offer you 4 questions that I think are really key to that matter. The first one is, ask yourself when you are facing the shadows of the reality, what do I ignore? And that is an important question. It's not what do I know, because you don't know what you know and you don't know what you ignore, specifically speaking. But when you're asking yourself, what do I ignore? You put yourself in a stance where you admit that you're ignorant, that you admit that you have things to learn, that you can improve. And that's the moment where you will grow yourself. And then you will obviously improve the degree of knowledge that you have. So what do I ignore is key here, especially in this world of over-communication. I've told you we are surrounded with screens, with shadows, with images, with text, with lots of things that are just overwhelming us. And I can see that in my field, which is ethics of artificial intelligence. And especially with words, we are overwhelmed with narrative, words and story and discourses that's been said by other people just to sell us something, to make us believe in something, right? Once again, they have an agenda. And it's really important to ask yourself, what do I ignore about that? The word ethics is one good illustration here. Ethics is overused. It's kind of a buzzword now. But most of us, we don't know what ethics is. We see the sign, we can read the sign, you can listen to the sign, you can hear it clearly. But what is beyond ethics is really complex. There is one sign and a myriad of meanings. So what I ignore is all the meanings. Even myself teaching ethics, I know that I'm way more ignorant about ethics than I'm knowledgeable. So you need to know what is behind these words, behind what we call an hypernym. An hypernym is an umbrella word. And this umbrella word, if you don't look at it, and if you don't take care of it, if you don't try to look behind it, you will fall into the trap of what I called hyponymarchy. Hyponymarchy is the government of behavior through hyponyms, through umbrella word. The second question is, where do the data come from? And that is key. That might sound a little bit obvious, I guess, but it's really important to know where the data come from. You have to understand what are the sources. Every data has an emitter, and every emitter has an agenda, has a stance, has biases, has a direction. You have to understand that. You have to see what is behind the data that you provided with. Once again, about AI ethics, I can see that the narrative has been shaped by institutions, what we call norms entrepreneurs. It has been set by private companies as well. And it's important when you listen about the narrative on AI ethics, about trustworthiness, about privacy, about responsibility, about accountability, about those words, you have to understand who said them, who created the narrative, for what purpose. So it's really important to understand the origin of the data. The third question is, what is missing from the frame? And this question can be subdivided into 2 parts. The first one is the easiest one, is what is missing in the data that has not been put on the image of the reality? What are the data that have been set apart? What is the voice that I can hear that has not been presented here? So you can look at that, but the second part is a bit more complex. It's about what is missing from myself. And it's this small inner voice telling you, okay, stop a little, pause for a while, and just think about the data and try to think about where they come, what they are telling you, think about yourself. Instead of just sharing something like it was information that now you know about it. Just pause. That's really important. The fourth and final question is definitely the most challenging. It's what would change your mind? It's challenging because it requests each of us to start with the assumption that we might be wrong. Obviously, it's easier to accept that you might be wrong if you accept that you're ignorant. But even when you say you're ignorant, you don't like to be wrong. What would change your mind is about me understanding my own biases, my own limitation. The fact that I have only a limited amount of data, that maybe my inferences are not correct, that maybe I am biased, maybe I am self-confident, maybe I am a conformist, I'm just repeating what I've been told. So what would change my mind is really challenging because it goes really deep into yourself. When I was asked to give this talk, I was first overexcited, obviously. I was thrilled. I was honored, and I was flattered. It's TED, after all, right? And it's École Polytechnique, so two good reasons to be flattered. But quite soon after that, I started doubting about myself. I started asking myself lots of questions about what would change my mind. Am I right? Am I correct? Maybe I'm wrong. And then I started reviewing my talk all the time, make it a bit cleaner, a bit deeper, a bit stronger, better articulation. I don't know if I succeeded, but I did it. I worked on it a lot. And what I've done through that is that I've learned. I've increased my degree of knowledge. But I did not remove doubt. Doubt is still there. And right now, in front of you, I'm still doubting. And I'm happy with that, because I feel like doubt is, once again, my energy. It's what makes me feel alive when I'm doing this. And we want to feel alive. All this is about keeping the human alive. So you might think that maybe I'm just providing with instruction about how to deal with your life, that you must be thinking critically all the time, that you must doubt all the time, that you must leave the cave. That is not what I mean, not at all. What matters is not that you leave or you stay in the cave. That is up to you. And both options are totally acceptable. What matters here is that it must be your choice. What matters here is that because you are aware of your ignorance, you just take back the reign of your free will. And free will is key. As Rousseau was saying, you cannot renounce your liberty without renouncing your humanity. And we want to stay human. We want to remain human. I will leave you with just one question. Really easy question, but really tough to address. And the question is, when was the last time you changed your mind about something you were certain of?